From the headquarters of MedianReport in Riga, Latvia, please welcome your host, Chris Peterson.
It's been a hurricane-like riding geopolitics with sharp mood swings in global markets over the past 2 weeks. Gold and silver prices are climbing, while a Danish pension fund is selling U.S. treasuries worth $100 million. Donald Trump sits at the center of much of this turbulence, and we will unpack it today with Professor Emeritus at Central Washington University, Charles Pinzon. You will also hear key highlights from the World Economic Forum in Davos, and we will take a hard look at the state of Europe with none other than the Chief Economist of the European Investment Bank, Debora Revoltella. This is MedianReport. My name is Chris Peterson, and we will talk. The beginning of the year is usually slow and calm, at least in the Baltic economies. Estonia is still yawing slightly after a long, tough year. Industry slowed, taxes went up, and energy stayed pricey. But the mood is improving as tech exports and defense-related businesses quietly get back to work, even if inflation keeps knocking on the door. Latvia has a little more bounce in its step, proudly pointing to record foreign investment deals worth €1 billion in 2025, while at the same time tightening the rules in the non-banking sector. Lithuania, meanwhile, is the overachiever in the room, riding stronger exports, lively factories, and a fast-growing fintech and digital sector that keeps growth humming louder than its neighbors. Across all three, business lenders are cautiously optimistic, not throwing a party, but at least planning one while still grumbling about labor shortages, rising wages, cyber risks, and global uncertainty. The stock markets aren't exactly on fire, but investors are still shopping carefully, eyeing green energy, defense supply chains, and companies that actually make money. But to be honest, all the attention last week was grabbed by the World Economic Forum in Davos. World leaders, heads of state, corporate chiefs, top journalists, and influential thinkers, the elite of the elites, gathered in the Swiss Alps to listen, to speak, and to try to shape the world's direction. The biggest surprise came from none other than the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, whose speech is already being talked as historic. Carney argued that the post-Cold War rules-based international order has reached a rupture and urged middle powers to act together rather than rely on a system that no longer protects them, calling for strategic autonomy, diversified cooperation, and collective strength among democracies to shape the future. His blunt address warning that great powers are increasingly using economic integration as leverage and saying middle powers must act together because if we are not at the table, we are on the menu. It drew a rare standing ovation and has become a defining Davos moment. The forum also marked an unusual moment when the U.S. president, who arrived amid headlines over Greenland and trade tensions, came out of Davos with a noticeably more cautious tone on some of the issues. U.S. President Donald Trump used his speech to defend his record and American interests and later withdrew Canada's invitation to his so-called Board of Peace, an initiative he announced at the forum that was meant to include leaders agreeing to fund it with $1 billion each, though many saw it as lacking clarity and broad support. Trump's address included typical themes of American strength and leadership, but also drew rebukes from other attendees. For example, he told Carney that Canada lives because of the United States, a remark that was itself widely discussed and criticized. We'll have a separate section in this show about Europe, so I will hold off here on discussing speeches by Emmanuel Macron, Ursula von der Leyen, Friedrich Merz, and what many saw as significant address for Europe from the IMF's managing director, Kristalina Georgieva. Instead, let's stay with the US because I want to understand how regular Americans decent folks from a range of backgrounds feel right now about issues from Venezuela to street violence, from ICE actions to the broader performance of the White House. To help unpack all that, we welcome back Charles Pinzon, the professor emeritus at Central Washington University.
Well, Trump, too, his second term is radically different from his first term. This is a term that the agenda and the means of achieving the agenda has changed completely. So really what we're dealing with here, I think, is something very new in American politics, certainly something as new as the New Deal from Franklin Roosevelt way back in 1933. It's a different view of the presidency. It's a different view of the relationship of the president and the other branches of the government, the legislature and the courts. It's an emboldened and not especially Republican view of the office of the presidency, which is a very powerful, at least as I believe Trump sees it, as a very powerful, almost unidirectional office. How much of this is Trump and how much of it is the people that are in this government, the people behind the scenes, I don't know. I'm not sure anyone really knows. Trump doesn't have a history of being a particularly of political philosophy of any kind. He's been a Democrat. He's been pro-abortion. Now he's pro-life. But what we do know, at least what I believe, is he's very much pro-power. And whatever will write him into that position, he's perfectly fine with.
Yeah. Yesterday, I listened to 4 New York Times reporters when they had an opportunity to speak with the president in the office. But let's say that's a very rare opportunity, and especially for the New York Times, which is not the most favorite his newspaper, I would say.
Yeah, no.
But and there was like so many interesting things coming out of this interview, and first of that was for me myself that he clearly does not understand the office of the presidency. He said that over all international treaties, his judgment is the priority. That was his words. So does that somehow worry you, like as a citizen?
Very
of the
much.
country?
Very much. There is, I don't know what the legal framework, for example, of our intervention and kidnapping of President Maduro is. I don't know. I don't know what would be the legal framework for an acquisition or annexation of Greenland. That has not been made clear. And I don't hear very many voices, unfortunately, in our legislature making that inquiry. He pretty much has a compliant House and a compliant Senate, and the courts have been, at least the Supreme Court, has certainly been very friendly to his moves thus far. So it worries me, yes, greatly, that we will have, and I think it should worry the Republicans just as much as the Democrats, because when Trump is no longer in office, and we have a Democrat who has inherited this tradition of a imperial president, well, he will have a different agenda, or she will have a different agenda than Trump, and I think that's worrisome for our democracy.
Yeah. You have, of course, experience in your life. You have seen many presidents, and can you say that Donald Trump somehow resembles any of the presidents you have been through?
I go back to, because of my advanced age, I go back to Harry Truman. I don't have any particular memory of him, except on early television, they used to show him taking his walks and talking to reporters on his walks. But no, he's unique. If you look at Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Ford, Nixon, Carter, and the list goes on. These men, and they were all men, pretty much institutional. They had political or military backgrounds. And I think all of them had been politicians. with the exception of President Eisenhower, who was, of course, commander of Allied forces during World War II. And these men operated, they had mildly different center left, center right, but it was still center views of the office of the president and their agenda. But what Trump is doing is radically different. I think it's as radically different, maybe more so. It'd be more like comparing Herbert Hoover with Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the Hoover's view of government in 1932 versus the newly elected President Roosevelt in 1932. So this is a first, in my opinion.
Yeah, and from this part of the ocean, I think that the Richard Nixon's Watergate scandal just looks like kids' games comparing to how he treats power. Let's say that.
Yes, Nixon was still very much an institutional politician, institutional Republican. And these were very different times. Nelson Rockefeller, who tried to get the nomination, which went ultimately to Nixon in his first run, was divorced. And that, in those days, this is almost 60 years ago, ruled him out as a candidate. Of course, now we have Mr. Trump, who is twice divorced, 3 times married. No problem. It is, I live in the Deep South, a very red state. And the view of, and people here, and by that I mean the majority of white people, and I want to be very clear about that because in the Deep South, I live in one state where 1/3 of the population is black, African American, 2/3 white. But among the whites, President Trump is very popular, remains very popular. And from what I hear from the people I'm in contact with, the white people that I know, they're perfectly happy with what they think he is doing. I'm not sure. I don't press them because I'm trying to be friends with these people, and I don't say, well, what has he done? And I don't want to do that. I avoid that because.
But Charles, what do you think? How they just justify his actions? Like, for example, let's say the same Epstein list or the same, I don't know, whatever we can call these. Yeah.
That would have killed.
How they justify?
Oh yeah, that would have killed Obama. Trump can get away with. Obama could not have done anything that Trump has done and gotten away with it. Not Zip 01. I remember Fox News hair was on fire because President Obama wore a light tan suit, and I mean something as trivial as that, and yet we have he is a convicted rapist, and there's these child pornography, preying on children or young teenagers, whatever it may be, allegations which have been stifled. It was Mr. Trump who made it a great issue in his campaign. Let's bring out the Epstein files. Now he doesn't want them brought out, but he's acquiesced. But a very submissive Department of Justice is very carefully screening all of this material. So I have a hunch what we're going to see, if we see anything, is going to be very, very heavily redacted. I think, why do the people I know here in Louisiana, why do they approve of this? And I think it's because they see him as a Gideon, a champion of white hegemony. In other words, white people should be in charge. White males should be in charge. More specifically yet, white Christian males should be in charge. I was at a memorial service on Saturday, and I heard those very words in a eulogy for a member of my church who had died, delivered by her son, saying that this was the Christian way, that the man should be the head of the household, etc., etc. This view is held very strongly in red states. It comes out of conservative Christianity, which is very Calvinist, and there's a strong strain of that in the United States. But I think, and I've heard a few people pretty much say about it, I think it's the last gasp of white male hegemony, and which is, I think, is fading. But I see it in my own family. Some men are very conservative, or very reluctant to give up what they perceive to be their God-given right to this power. And of course, the world is changing, but they're holding on to this as long as they can.
How you see, Charles, the media landscape had changed during this year, because we have had some events like, for example, trying to ban Jimmy Kimmel a show. There we know that this Kennedy Center renaming Trump and everything around that. Hollywood hasn't been really involved in, I think, many of the issues, but then and there. But how you see this media landscape changing?
It's certainly become much more acquiescent, and George Carlin, who is an American comic, I think he had some international reputation, but he's been dead now 10 years, but I always thought of him as a prophet. And he warned Americans in his comic routines that essentially we were going from a democracy to a country, to an oligarchy, to be specific. And we see this oligarchic trend extending. There's a continued. I was listening yesterday after church services to a farmer, and he was complaining that he has a choice of dealing with two suppliers to buy his product. That's it. One of two. Maybe three if he looks real hard. And he says they determine how he runs his business. And it has to be a very large, automated, low-cost business. And, this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with more and more consolidation of media. And yes, who owns the media? It's owned by the oligarchs. I mean, the acquisition, the Washington Post is owned by Amazon's Jeff Bezos. The networks... his name escapes me, but from Larry Ellison, I believe, Oracle is involved with the acquisition.
Larry Ellison, yeah, Oracles,
yeah. Of CBS News. So, and now we're talking about a merger between the Paramount Plus properties and the Warner Discovery properties, which is, we're going to be down to essentially three. And this seems to be the way of brokers, three owners of any particular business. As we say in the United States, we have something called the Standard Industrial Classification, the SIC code. And you can go through, I think, just about all of these, and you'll discover that there's two or three entities that run just about all of the manufacturing and service distribution in the United States. And sometimes it may be only one. It harkens back to the days when Kodak owned and operated the film business. And of course, that's long gone. But now, in terms of web searching and whatnot, and web hosting, we're dealing with very few suppliers.
With the oligarchy, yeah. Interesting. And from this, yeah. I mean, from like a very human point of view, I know a lot of people here in Europe. They turn their heads to Asia and they say we don't go to vacations to United States anymore. And I think the image, what has been like the damage of the image of the United States internationally has been quite a ride that year.
Well, the only example that I can think of immediately in terms of the impact on tourism, which is a significant part of our economy, we're not as beholden to it as, say, some smaller countries such as Croatia, for example, are. I think it's about 1/3 of Croatia's economy, but that's a very small country. But still, it's in a state like Nevada, which is a fairly small state, but you have one city, Las Vegas, which is really hurting right now. I hear a lot of reports that Las Vegas is pretty much empty. And of course, I think Las Vegas brought that on itself because it's taken all the charm and allure that it used to have, and it's just, in a way, priced itself out of a lot of the markets, but it's not getting the foreign tourist. Yes, I know. Even doing business, something as simple as I was trying to buy some music by a German musician. And so I ordered it before Thanksgiving, which is middle in our country. It's in the middle of November. It still has not arrived. It's still
Yeah.
caught up in tariffs. And this is something that cost
Wow.
about 40 euro. I mean, it's negligible. But even trade at that level has become very, very difficult. And the thing I don't understand is why they eliminated the exemption for small business people. I mean, we're talking about, to use an American term, nickels and dimes. I mean, this is no big sum of money, but it's stifled trade even at that level.
Oh, that sounds really crazy. Yeah. One more thing is what I we hear and see in the news is about the recent murder of that lady in Minnesota.
Yes,
Yeah, was
yes,
it
yes,
in Minnesota?
Minneapolis. Hmm.
Yeah, by ICE agent. Uh, and about this icy, how you call it, ice probably, yes. So
Yes.
are they somehow? It's kind of like called from one point of view they are homeland security,
Hmm.
but from the other point of view, they can be looked as like Trump's like personal army or something like that. Even that case, is that something somehow a threat? You think that this internal militarization of giving some smaller group of people such powers?
We have never in the United States, even back in the days when major corporations hired essentially gangsters to break up unions and union organizations and union rallies. And I mean, we're talking about the turn of the century, the last century. Uh, we've not seen people with minimal training. Minimal training. A local policeman has 3 to 4 times the training that these ICE agents have, or many of them have. And certainly the notion of somebody in a balaclava or wearing a mask we haven't had that since the 19th century when gangsters go into a bank and it was the bad guy who wore the mask, not the good guy. And this is they're only beholden to federal power. They come in with the same power that a federal marshal would, and they're not subject to local police or state police, which we have in this country, regulation. And in fact, in the investigation of the killing of the woman in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, uh, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, has not cooperated with the Attorney General or the police in that. A murder, if it's indeed murder, is not a federal crime by and large. It is a local crime. It is a state crime. And that typically is in the jurisdiction of the city and the state. Somehow, the federal government has determined that this was an act of terrorism and qualifies for federal intervention. Frankly, I don't think this is going to pass through the courts, but we're talking about months, perhaps even years of litigation before any of that is decided. We have to go to a district court, then we have to go to an appeals court, then we have to go to the Supreme Court. So this is coming from what the political party that used to that part of American politics that used to advocate states' rights. But it was states' right. It really wasn't states' rights. It was racism, and so this is politics of convenience, in my
Yeah.
humble opinion. I think it's frightening. I think it's frightening to
Okay.
have a federal agent come in wearing a mask, unidentified, without a warrant, able to do what they try to do. There has been quite a bit of resistance to this, and I would say not a lot of cooperation on the part of many Americans. You look at the locations that have been,
Mm.
they're invariably cities which are usually run by Democrats, the Blues, uh, and uh, and a lot of this is, if you look at it, and of course there have been court judgments saying you can't do this, but Mr. Trump will do whatever he does until somebody tells him no. And that somebody has to be the Supreme Court. So we're talking about we're going to be waiting months, perhaps years, for any limitations on this.
Okay. How do you see midterm elections? What's in your crystal ball?
Oh, polling these days, we could talk about that for hours, is so difficult because people don't answer their phones anymore. And so polling has become very expensive. And because it's become so expensive, the the accuracy, the margin of error on polls has become much larger than it was when I was a young man. Back in the days of the Gallup poll, they could do a presidential poll in the 60s and the 70s with a margin of error of 1.5%. Now, typically, it's 3.5% on either side. That's a lot of room.
That's a lot.
I would say, from what we have seen so far, we've had some special elections. I think they call them by-elections in England, and the Democrats have outperformed. They've done better than they did with Harris running for president. I think, unless something happens dramatically in the economy, I think the Democrats have hit on something that's, I think, going to work for them, and that is affordability, because our rents are very high. The cost of homes, we have a whole generation of people, and this is not just in the United States, this is, I think, global in many regards. A generation, our millennials and whatnot, will not be able to buy homes. We're going to make a transition to renting, because the cost of buying a home first is beyond the ability of most people these days. Rents, it used to be that it was wise to spend about 25% of your income on rent. Well, that's moved up to 30%. Now it's getting closer to 33%. If you can find something like that, but there are many people who are living with relatives or friends. They're doing, they're in their 30s and 40s, and they have roommates because, especially in the very big cities, the rents are so extraordinarily high. And part of the reason for that is that property has become more of an investment for people who do not live in those properties. I read where 10% of all the apartments, flats in Manhattan, New York, are empty. They're owned by investors who don't see any particular reason why, because the property will always increase in value in Manhattan. So why wear down the property with renters who are so annoying, and they always have complaints, when you can just keep it empty and watch the value of your investment rise faster than inflation, or perhaps even what the banks are paying. So there's really no incentive to offer affordable renting or to sell affordable homes. So, but I don't hear the politicians. We've gotten so hung up on trans rights, minutia, which bathrooms to use. All of these things are,
Yeah.
They deal with such tiny numbers of people. We're not really talking about, and by we, I mean the body politic, are not really talking about the affordability, which is what people are concerned with.
Exactly. So you think that the Democrats can regain the power within the House and Senate, and
Well, I think they can. I think they have a
bring
very good shot of getting the House, because that's right now is extremely tight. The Republican Party only has, I think, a 3 or 4 seat majority in the party, and
yeah.
and they have some mavericks who don't always toe the party line. So they have already voted against the Speaker Johnson, and voted with the Democrats. I think the Democrats will take control of the House. The Senate is a much more difficult. I think
Tougher.
much
Yeah.
tougher. I think it. Yeah, I think it would have to be a really blue tsunami for them to take the Senate. But I don't know. I just don't get a real, because I live here in the deep South. I really don't get a flavor for people's concerns. Not until I talk to my friends and
No.
people I know in the North and the West.
Yeah.
Their concerns about our out of control ICE agents and factors like that. I just don't know. I haven't seen any poll
Okay.
numbers yet either. I wish I could say, but the polling isn't out yet.
All right. Yeah, and my probably last question about the chances that Donald Trump could be impeached by not reaching the end of his term. How you think would that be a possibility?
Yeah, I think that would be a very strong possibility because it only takes a majority of the House to begin the impeachment process. The problem with that is it takes 2/3 of the Senate to convict. And we have never convicted. We've had how many impeachments? 1, 2, 3, 4. I think only 4 impeachments in the history of the United States, of which Mr. Trump has had 2 of them. And none had been convicted. The closest we came was the impeachment of Andrew Johnson, who was president after Abraham Lincoln in the 19th century. He was excused by 1 vote. Otherwise, he would have been convicted and removed from office. But I think, yeah, he could be impeached, but to have him convicted, I would say the chances are less than 1 in 10 that would happen. However, I don't think Mr. Trump is going to fill out his term. I honestly think, I've been watching this man for years. You know, he's a New Yorker. He's from Queens, New York. I'm a New Yorker. I've been watching this guy for years. You know, he loves to be in any media that he can get his hands on. And I actually think his health is failing. His physical and mental health is failing. We have gotten so used to his out of control, rambling speeches and answers and questions that it is now disguised, I think, and I'm not qualified as a doctor, but this is just my impression, of a man who's very much like Joe Biden at the end of his career. Trump is a little bit older than I am, and he will be 80 in June. And his father, about the same age, had Alzheimer's and had suffered from dementia and was no longer of sound mind. I honestly don't think he's going to serve out his term. I think he'll have to retire or resign from office, and Mr. Vance will assume that position.
When it comes to Europe, the tone is yet hopeful, but in all honesty, not very positive. Point by point, it was reminded to Europeans of their homeworks by Kristalina Georgieva, the managing director of International Monetary Fund, at CNBC's Davos coverage. Let's listen.
We are on record multiple times appealing to the Europeans to complete the single market, to concentrate on their domestic competitiveness. Europe has fallen behind in productivity. Europe has fallen behind in getting small companies to grow to giants, and that has to change. There are 4 things Europe needs to do. They know it, but they're kind of slow in the doing. 1, capital markets union. Make European money work for Europe. Right now, 300 billion euros European savings are in the United States. 2, complete their energy union. It is impossible to compete with 27 different energy systems. 3, complete labor market movement with qualifications. You cross the border from Germany to France, you can't work there. And 4, we want to see in Europe much more attention to research translating into innovation and capital. So, Europeans, if you are watching, get your act together.
French President Emmanuel Macron emphasized that European competitiveness is absolute priority, calling for protection, simplified rules, and focused investment to modernize the continent's economic framework. European Commission's President Ursula von der Leyen spoke of the urgency mindset when addressing economic transformation, stressing that nostalgia will not fix Europe's competitiveness gaps. Adaptation will. One wonders to whom exactly she was speaking, if not to herself and her fellow leaders. And finally, Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz added that Europe's overall security is tightly linked to its economic strength, warning again that over-bureaucratization must be eliminated as quickly as possible. I discussed these themes of European competitiveness and also the state of the Baltic economies with Debora Revoltella, Chief Economist of the European Investment Bank in Luxembourg.
It's interesting. This is a very, very interesting moment in time. We see the whole geopolitical risk that is emerging, and we see this dialogue among big, with the US, China, Europe unfolding, and I'm very conscious on the difficulty at the European level to keep unity and keep responding in a coherent way. But I'm very impressed of what, on the policy point of view, we are delivering as Europe. So I think it's...
we start... But
yeah.
Maybe if I may suggest, we can start maybe with a smaller region of Baltics, and then we will talk about the issues in Europe, because of course there are a lot of issues, and I want to also cover them as much as I can. But let's maybe start with the Baltics and how European Investment Bank is looking at the Baltic region, and for example, how it's been impacted by the war between Russia and Ukraine.
I think the region is a very interesting region on the macroeconomic point of view in terms of unfolding development. It's definitely a region that is very close to the worst of the part of this geopolitical risk that we are seeing, and that has been affected in many different ways, from the trade side, from the energy side, from the security side in particular. But what we are seeing actually, it's a rather positive development in the region in terms of economic growth, and we forecast some acceleration as much as at the European level all over the region coming up. We also see, and it's very much coherent to what is happening at the European level, the region was, of course, massively affected by the energy shock and the crisis shock, also in terms of inflation. And the inflation remains, if you want, still among the highest level in the region compared to what is happening in the rest of the European Union. But as everywhere else, actually, the pressure are slowly starting to stabilize. So we are not very much concerned in the short term in terms of the economic outlook. I think the economic outlook in the Baltics, like in Europe, is an outlook of slowly accelerating growth for 2026, still comfortable position in terms of inflation that leaves the central bank, the ECB, quite confident that they are at the right level in terms of policies. But on the other side, we see this enormous amount of risk that is coming up from the geopolitical side, but also from the security point of view, if you want, and a lot of challenge that are emerging. But what I was saying at the beginning is that it's also true that the region, like Europe, have been dealing well with the challenge in the last years. So what we have seen, and I think we always forget it when we talk about Europe, because we Europeans tend to be very negative always. What is missing, and never saying what is happening positively.
That's true. Yeah.
But I think at the European level, we have to recognize that we have made massive transformation in the last years. One is related to the energy sector. In the energy sector, when the crisis came up, we saw we couldn't live without the Russian gas. And now we are phasing out completely Russian gas. We got the agreement among all member states, which is not trivial to get the agreement, but we are phasing out it by 2027. And also what we see is that the transformation of the energy market is taking place. In the Baltics, you have the now not so new, but the LNG terminal that gives the lifelines. We see massive investment in renewable all over Europe that tend to stabilize a new system for the energy sector. So this is happening. We also see a very strong focus on innovation. In Europe, we have still actually quite good competitiveness in some high-tech sectors that is taking place. And we see a lot of focus on try to use industrial policy in a different way and actually support the strengthening of areas of competences where Europe can make it on the innovation side and can make it through existing competences on the industrial side. But also, and that's what is very important also in the Baltics, we have seen defense and security that becoming a top priority at the European level for obvious reason has substantially shifted also the way of cooperation among member states, a way of cooperation and decision taking, but also the investment activities taking place. And I think there the Baltics have really shown how to move fast. And we know that the new target for security and defense of 5%, Poland is getting there. Most of the Baltic countries are getting there. And actually, this investment in security and defense is becoming quite an interesting test case for Europe, how to really deliver on this investment and maximize the return on the economy, also through European supply chain, if possible. It depends. More focus on the investment side and really on the innovation side. But the most important point, I think, it remains of working coordinated among Europeans. And I think the news that we see in the last days show that there is also, on a policy point of view, a lot of need of coordination at the European level, but also response united at the European level, which is a very good point of view.
I'm listening what you're saying, and this is what I have heard also in different audiences in Brussels when, for example, in the business summit last year, where it was said also that Nordics plus Baltics and Poland can actually be a new Kickstarter for the European growth. And of course, the inflation remains pretty high, but on the other hand, it may also play in favor, maybe sometimes in this case. But how do you see this? Can we be then a kickstart region for Europe, or still Germany will lead the way all through the?
I think what you see in the region is first of all a lot of so the next phase of growth and the medium term challenge for Europe has always been a too static environment and the need of a transformation of the economy. And I think the Baltics and partly also Poland has shown this capacity to transform and actually to have a more dynamic system. Look at the innovation side. The region has some quite interesting pools of innovative companies developing, even unicorns that have created an environment of innovation that is quite interesting. The security part has created areas of excellence in cybersecurity work. It's you
Exactly.
are at
Yeah.
the front line of a very of a very difficult geographical position, if you want, at that point of view. But you are learning and responding to it with a lot of innovation power and also a lot of transformation. And that's I think it's quite important for the region going forward. So this innovation focus, paying attention to the new risk, the cybersecurity risk one, the security and defense one, etc., are quite important. And it's a quite dynamic ecosystem that you start seeing developing. And also on the public sector side, I think there has been a lot of innovation on that point of view. It's interesting because at the European level, what we say is that in the last years, a lot of investment was driven by the support of the public sector, both directly and indirectly. So the public sector has been investing a lot because of the recovery and resilience facility. In some countries, use structural funds, but also because of a lot of support from the public sector to the private sector for investing. And but the private sector kept a bit more of a stagnant perspective in terms of transformation. What we see, and we actually have our survey of European firms and firms in the Baltics, but what we see that in the Baltics, firms are actually quite positive on new investment activities. They have been looking at, despite uncertainty is massive, but they felt the pressure to transform, innovate, and continue to invest, which is a positive sign because it's a very challenging environment, but the firms can only navigate it if they really transform themselves. And I think in the Baltic, we have seen a bit of this transformation coming in.
Yes. And what I'm looking is also the scale, because what I'm a bit worried is that, and you also mentioned this, that we have very nice and good works in innovation and technology in high-tech sector, but still in terms of scale, American and Chinese companies are on the different league, on a different level. And also I think that EIB is always interested in the bigger projects, to invest in bigger infrastructure projects and so on. So it means that we have rather small scale still in Europe, and that can be a maybe mid-term or long-term problem for us in the economies. How do you look at that?
I think the issue of scale has various ramifications. I start from, because you speak about the US and China, I think we should first speak about Europe. And the issue of scale of Europe is the scale of the European single market. And that is something that I think at the European level, we need to become much more conscious of the fact that the single market is a huge asset for Europe and for companies in Europe. You need a wide market for giving firms, European firms, the market and the security on the demand side that makes them grow and profit and compete globally. And what we see at the European level is that still today, 60% of European firms tell us that when they export within Europe, so they face barriers. So it's not so smooth. Sometimes there is invisible barrier, but actually it's not so smooth. And it should be much smoother in order for Europe to really profit. What we see in our analysis is that actually this leads firms to constrain their investment activities. They see less opportunities, and this is particularly true in terms of innovative technologies. So you really need this fixing the single market and pushing forward. And it's even more important at the time of economic security issues, because you really want to profit for a market that you can control and you know what it is about. So this moving faster on the integration of the EU single market, I think it's a very important element. But then scale is also a matter of growth of firms. And that is something that at the EIB we are very conscious about. We know that Europe has a lot of innovation at the very early stage. We have a lot of support actually to the scale, to the early stage of innovation up to a certain point. And then when firms become at a certain size, the whole support system kind of is less there. And then companies, they all study, European companies going abroad, etc., and what we can do. We are really looking at the instruments that can continue to support the firms when there is what we call a scale-up phase. So when the startup or scale-up firms, they get to a certain size that they need larger ticket for their future growth. And that's the area of attention at the policy point of view. At the European level, we are doing it with the European Tech Champion Initiative, and now looking at a second phase of the European Tech Champion Initiative. And we're looking at two things. One, really the scale, so the ways to support large enough companies, but we are also looking at a little bit smaller sizes, exactly to look at the smaller markets that may need more of this. And the other point that we are looking at quite a lot is if you talk about the single market, you also have to look at the financial sector point of view, and that's the investment and saving union or saving and investment union, in fact. And there, it's not only how you bring finance to innovative companies, but also how can you transform savings into in a cross-border basis into financing these innovative companies.
Exactly.
And there we think there is much more to do with institutional investor and pension funds, and how you can bring this part of the market, of the saving market, if you want, insurance and pension funds, also looking into innovation and innovation finance. And we are looking at the systems to actually in some countries, pension systems are already doing this job, but in other countries, there is a less expertise, and we are trying to look at ways in which we can share our expertise and make sure that the pension funds and insurance can also enter into this market. It's all a matter of scales, and I understand that coming from very small countries, it's the benefit of the use, but you should still consider the EU single market as an asset for you, and the circulation of saving in the single market as an asset for you. And that's something quite important to look at.
Exactly, I agree 100%. And I would add maybe my own thing that I thought that, and you also mentioned that in 4 years we were able to transform the energy market when the war started in Europe. So it was quickly done. No, okay, maybe might be a better solutions and more quicker, but still it's kind of on this time scale a very nice and good result. But there is this pressure to really make the single market and the single capital market to work in Europe, and I think that there is no enough pressure. Although we and economists and media people and everyone is talking about it, and I know central bankers and ECB talks about that a lot, but still. It's kind of not on the top priority list of policymakers.
I think it's coming. From where I sit, I see that the pressure It's really coming. So we are.
No, it's coming. It's always coming, and,
Yeah.
and I know Madame Lagarde is talking about that every day almost. but it's somehow.
I think we see it concretely emerging, if you want, at this point in time as trying to find a solution. And I think what is interesting is that for a long time there was a lot of discussion whether the saving and investment union would mean a deeper capital market at the country level or a more integrated capital market. And I think now it's really clear that it's the integration that matters. So this pan-European, if you want, circulation of savings that go from one side to the innovation, so from savings that are less active, if you want, toward innovation finance. So this, but in a pan-European way. And I think the pan-European element matters a lot because it matters a lot also for smaller countries. What we lost today was that a lot of the savings that were looking for equity kind of return, actually they were going to the US. So you want to have a circulation that allows this kind of saving also to stay in Europe. And that's the effort. And I would say that 2026, I hope, will really be the year for a step forwards on the saving and investment union. And I think the geopolitical pressure will help us. Let's put in this way.
Yes. Thank you, Debora, and I wish you and the organization very happy 2026 and less turbulence, more predictable environment for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I hope it was fun to watch and listen. We went through all of the topics I was planned to cover again in just about an hour. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Subscribe to MedianReport on YouTube or Spotify. I see you again in 2 weeks. My name is Chris Peterson, and we will talk.